Hello everybody, SlimKirby here, and welcome to the next minigame ranking video. And after a rather brief stint on the Wii, we're already moving on to the Wii U with Mario Party 10. And if you guys don't remember correctly, well, I'm not exactly super fond of Mario Party 10. Over the years, I've grown to appreciate some parts of it, but as an entire package, it definitely feels a bit lacking in the substance department. Thankfully though, we're just looking at the minigames today, and like all Mario Party games, I do think there is some value here. Just goes to show that even after 16 years and 10 titles, the developers still knew how to make a minigame, and while there will be some stinkers in here, I'd still say the vast majority are at least passable. Speaking of which, what kind of numbers are we looking at this time? Well, we did lose a few from Mario Party 9, and with 31 free-for-alls, 10 2 vs 2s, 10 1 vs Rivals, 10 boss minigames, 10 Bowser minigames, and 4 bonus games, we have a grand total of 75. Still a pretty high number, but still a quarter shorter than what we'll have to deal with in Top 100 and Superstars territory. Which, yeah, as I've said before, I do have intention of heading into spin-off territory this time around, so 10 will not be the stopping point this time. And as usual, these lists are purely my opinion, so if you disagree, that's more than fine, and you are more than willing to share your reasons why in the comments section below. Just do not insult my opinion or anyone else's in the process. That's a big no-no. So, without further delay, let's break out our gamepad, our Wiimotes, and the occasional amiibo that's laying around. Seriously, so many accessories for one game. And let's get into ranking the minigames of Mario Party 10. Although, I can't help but think I'm forgetting something. It can't be that important. Let's get on with the show.
What? He's starting the Mario Party 10 list without me? He said I was supposed to be the star of that video. Just you wait, SlimKirby. Soon, you will feel my fury.
Actually, didn't he already beat Bowser's Fury?
Shut up.
Number 75. I hate to be already picking on the Wii U gamepad and one of the game's main modes here, but of all the games in Mario Party 10, this one feels almost unplayable to me. So, last place goes to Bowser's Wicked Wheel, and these are the reasons why. Now, my gamepad has seen better days, so this could be a fault of my hardware more than the game's core mechanics. But using the stylus to move the wheel as Bowser, especially when the user is in a desperate 1 versus up to 4 scenario, where they need to score hits in order to stay relevant, and I'm already worried that too much force could put a dent in my already worn gamepad, just doesn't put me in a comfortable state for this game, especially when there are times where it feels like the stylus controls don't really match the wheel turning motions that well, and you only use the stylus in one direction because the alternative is pressing the button to stop the wheel and potentially propel the players in the other direction, making it more of a fake out than an actual movement input. Also, Team Mario's movement is done purely by shaking the Wiimote here, meaning they should shake like crazy at all times, unless Bowser stops the wheel, of course. Overall, just a really awkward game to play on either side, made worse by how intense you need to be with the equipment that you feel like you need to be careful with. So, I'm most certainly not a fan of this minigame. Number 74, Bowser's Clawful Climb. Say it with me, folks. It's a button masher. Technically for both sides, too. Bowser alternates between 5 presses of the ZL and ZR buttons, while Team Mario alternates between A and 2. Honestly, this is probably ahead of the last game, just because I actually don't mind getting this against AI, because I'm pretty confident I can overpower them with Bowser. However, it's ultimately still a button masher, and not a great one conceptually either. Number 73, GOOMBRAT Combat. I'm actually surprised we have a 2 vs 2 lower than a free-for-all, or even a 1 vs Rivals game, but this game just feels completely chaotic, and not in a good way. Almost like an even worse version of Mario Party 7's Wait For It. And I don't think that game's too bad, but this game is a lot worse. The GOOMBRAT reactions are just so unpredictable that it almost feels like a luck-based game in a weird way. There's no real strategy, just mindless punching and hoping there aren't any GOOMBRATs on your side, and it's just kind of a messy minigame for me. Number 72, Mega MECHAKOOPA'S Swing and Stomp. Aside from being a bit of a mouthful of a title to say, this is my least favorite boss minigame in Mario Party 10. A lot of setup and particular timing is required to get a point, and if you mess up, not only will you miss getting a point, but you risk losing points and you have to go all the way back to the side to time another attack. Just very slow and not very fun for me. Number 71, BOB-OMB Combo. I thought this was a cool idea, but your performance is kind of out of your hands. You're supposed to detonate bob-ombs in a continuous chain, kind of like knocking over a line of dominoes, but since the bob-ombs can move while the detonations are happening, it feels a bit luck-based to me, and you know how I feel about luck-based minigames. Number 70, Hop, Drop, and Roll. A 1 vs. Rivals game that's kinda hard to win as the solo player, since your timing needs to be perfect in order to throw off your rivals. You need to time the bullet bills so they fire in conjunction with the rolling rolls, so your opposition is either forced to get spiked or blasted by an airborne bullet. Interesting idea and concept, but timing is everything, and by the time the solo player has it, the minigame may be halfway over already, and you do have to knock out more than one player too, and it's no guarantee. Number 69, Bobsled Battle. Another kind of meh 2 vs. 2 game. The idea is to either overpower or underpower your opponents to try and grab the most coins. It's just not that remarkable of a game idea in my opinion, when there are so many other better options in this title, and this one by itself just feels a bit weird to play, especially considering you have to use motion controls as well. Not a fan of this one. Number 68, BOWSER'S Bogus Bingo. It may be a luck-based minigame, but I'll cut it a bit of slack because it can be a bit entertaining to see how it progresses. It's still luck-based though, and because of that, well, the title says it all. That is pretty bogus.
Hey! SlimKirby!
Huh? Slim Bowser? What are you doing here? Oh, right. I said you could be in this video, didn't I? That's what I forgot.
I see how it is. So not only did you forget to bring me for my video, but you also put 3 of my minigames in the bottom 10? I should slow roast your hide for this.
Look, dude, I mean, King Dude, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to forget about you. It's just, well, you know how I am about Mario Party 10. The sooner I get it over with, the faster I can move on to some other Mario Party games. Games I actually enjoy to a greater degree. And that's all it is, I swear. You have full range over talking about all the Bowser games from now on, I promise. Just please, keep that flamethrower of a mouth of yours away from me. It's not even summer yet, and I'm already sweating up a storm.
Well, don't get too comfortable, because things are only gonna get hotter from here. Oh, yeah.
Number 67, Bubble Squabble. Another kind of one-sided 1 vs. Rivals game, although the idea is a little more clever than the last one we looked at. It's still kind of plagued by similar timing and pacing issues. The solo player blows bubbles to capture the other players, and if the bubbles go off screen with another player, they are eliminated. However, the team of rivals can free their allies by popping the bubbles, so all the team has to do is stick together and there's really nothing they can't accomplish. Also, blowing the bubbles can be a bit slow for the solo player, which can be considered another disadvantage for them. Number 66, Flash Forward. I really don't know why they've brought this game back twice now in future Mario Party installments, but I've always had an issue with how quick this game is. The goal is trying to be the character most front and center on the screen when the time runs out, while also somehow trying to avoid all the attacks and pushes from your opponents, which can make this game feel like a bit of a chaotic mess at times. Not only do you need to be front and center though, but once you stand on the pedestal, you'll perform a little pose animation that will give you bonus points, so you almost have to time your pushes at just the right time so you knock away any of your opposition while also getting enough time to pose as well to secure the victory. If this game wasn't just one round, I might be more inclined to rank this a bit higher, but since it's only one round, it just doesn't do it for me. Super Mario Party had a much better variation of this concept, and I can't wait till we get to that one because of that. Number 65, Fruit CAHOOTS. Yeah, it's a bit luck-based, but it's that strange blend of luck-based and mind game that usually gets me to cut a game like this a little bit of slack. Your goal is to try and accumulate as many apples as possible while also avoiding the BOB-OMBs. Each round you pick if you want to progress the conveyor belt one position forward or not, and once every player selects, the conveyor belt moves and you end up with whatever appears in front of you at the end of the round. This lasts for several rounds, so even if you get a bad start, it's not unheard of to make a comeback, and you may be able to mess up whoever takes the lead as well, which does give it an additional layer to speak of. Still a bit out of your hands, which is a negative for me, but at least it's not completely out of your hands. Number 64, Bowser Jr.'s Clobber Cage, and number 63, Bowser Jr.'s Bonk Battle. Putting these both here because while these games aren't bad per se, they're kind of pointless. You can only play them in very specific and rare instances of Amiibo Party, and from the main menus, and the games themselves are pretty generic. They're supposed to be like the Bowser Jr. minigames in Mario Party 9, which some had way more quality and substance than this, not to mention those were also co-op too. I put Bonk Battle just a small bit ahead of Clobber Cage because I found it a bit more interesting of a concept. Number 62, Revolving Relay. Although I'm usually a fan of platforming games, this one feels a bit more awkward to optimize for me. You have to move quickly but also efficiently, which can be a bit of a hard balance to meet, and any mistake can be rather costly here. It's cool that it's a 2 vs 2 minigame, as it does give that cooperative feel to it, but it's more taking turns than working together. It's okay, but there are better 2 vs 2s in this title for me. Number 61, PETEY'S Bomb Battle. It's a Wiimote shaker boss game, but there's a little bit of variance as you can't spam the shaking too wildly, since any shots that go in PETEY'S mouth will just get returned to you and cost you points in the process. While I think that it's a good twist on the game, it's still not a boss battle that I'm crazy about. Number 60, King Boo's Tricky Tiles. King Boo had such a great boss minigame in Mario Party 9, and this unfortunately just doesn't meet the same bar. There's a lot going on here, and while I don't hate the idea, it's so easy to get screwed over by positioning, in terms of where you start and where the point triggers end up. There's also a memorization aspect of this game too, which isn't bad per se, but when you need to be quick to get points across a wide playing field, it can be hard to keep your focus on everything, and it's so easy for other players to sneak right in front of you. Number 59, Soar to Score. My only real issue with this minigame is timing. You have 2 attempts to score points, and if you mess up the first run, it's likely you probably won't be the winner, even if you score well in the following swing. I don't know, it just feels difficult to get a feel for when you need to press the button, and by the time you do, the minigame is already over. Number 58, Magma Meltdown. Interesting idea for a survival game, but with a max of 4 players crowding around trying to avoid the sinking platforms, it can get a bit too crowded and claustrophobic, trying to stay on such a tiny safe spot. So, not incredibly fond of this one. Number 57, Badminton Bash. Next to the previous 2 games' bowling games, this is probably my least favorite extra sports game. It can be hard to aim the shuttlecock properly, not to mention it can be hard to react in time if it comes at you too fast. Not to mention, I find it can be easy to miss your swing sometimes due to positioning. Number 56, BOB-SLED. This game is fun, if you're the player with the nets. If you're carrying the flashlight, you really need to make sure your partner is on top of things, because ghosts can only be captured if a light is on them, and it doesn't necessarily have to be by the holder's partner either. So coordinating can be a bit difficult to manage, if even necessary in this case. Number 55, Watermelon WHALIN. This game is basically Lights Out from Mario Party 2 without the blackout, which makes it kind of underwhelming and not very interesting.
Number 54, Bowser's Hammer Slammer. Who needs giant muscles to squash your opponents when you have a giant hammer like I do? It's absolutely fun smashing your opponents in this game. But beware, because they may try to fake you out, and every time you miss striking them, you'll waste precious seconds in trying to knock away their hearts, which is especially demoralizing in the Bowser Challenge mode. Also, here's a tip. When you're playing as yours truly, don't watch the gamepad, watch the TV screen. It's easier to follow those pesky fools from Team Mario.
Number 53, Steal the Beat. It's been a while since we had a follow the beat type of game, and while this one can be fun to play, it's also kind of unbalanced in favor of the team, since they have plenty of mistakes they can make before they all fail, and the game does kind of just give you the correct inputs. So you just need to really stay on the rhythm, and that's not too hard to do here. Number 52, Blooper Blastoff. I like how the entire description for this minigame is bloop to the surface with the 2 button. It's an interesting idea trying to move like a blooper to the surface of the ocean, propelling yourself with blooper-like propulsions with a little bit of motion control to aim your direction. It's kind of awkward to play though, and one of those games where you'll likely need to practice or experiment with how to move properly a couple of times before you actually do it for real, and I'm not really a fan of that mindset. Number 51, Cheep, Cheep, Check. It's a 1 versus 3 roll call minigame, and once again, assuming the team players know how to count, it should be a very easy game to win. This could have probably been higher, but the solo player just doesn't really do much here. Even if they can obscure the screen a little, all it takes is just one person to count correctly, so it's kind of out of their own hands. Number 50, Goomba Gotcha. I think as a dual game exclusively, this game would have probably been a lot higher. However, 3 or 4 players trying to select the right type of Goomba first, with motion controls no less, and each incorrect selection costing points, this game kind of feels like a bit of a mess for me. I do think it's noble that Nintendo is trying to celebrate the diversity of different Goomba variations in Mario Party 10 though, as this isn't the last we'll see something like this. Number 49, Mega Bloopers Bubble Battle. Kind of like the last minigame in terms of pointing and clicking on the correct thing, but I think it's more controlled here. However, even as a boss minigame, I feel like this one goes kind of on a bit too long for my tastes. Not a bad game, but there are many better ones. Number 48, Spiked Ball Scramble. This game is fine, maybe kind of overstates its welcome a bit, but I can't really say there's much wrong with it either. I suppose perspective can be a little finicky here as well.
Number 47, Bowser's Painball. Oh yeah, nothing makes an awesome villain like me happy more than a good old-fashioned game of pinball. Especially when your foes are your targets.
Yeah, what is it with you and Dr. Eggman when it comes to pinball tables anyway?
I guess it's a good way to let out some extra rage and steam when you're infuriated.
Makes sense to me. Anyway, this game is fine, but I'm honestly not too crazy about pinball games. Probably because I'm not much of a pinball whiz, so I don't know the right processes for aiming and controlling the balls better. But it's a creative idea and isn't too bad to play. You can get some nice varying results with this one as a Bowser minigame too. Number 46, Cliffside Crisis. Sometimes you get a minigame in Mario Party and you know exactly how it's going to play out before it even starts. This is just another pretty standard survival game. Not bad, not amazing, but an interesting idea with the bomb enemies at least. Number 45, Keep Away Mayhem. I hated Keep Away, or Monkey in the Middle, or whatever variation of Don't Let the Dork in the Middle Have the Ball game you probably were privy to in elementary school. At least in Mario Party it does kind of work for the 1 versus Rivals category, and this game isn't too bad. Might seem like the solo player needs a small bit of luck to get by, but they can also try to trick the other players as well, which gives it some layers. Number 44, Skewer Scurry. I honestly probably like this game more than other people do, and for me, it's because I enjoy trying to find the best place to stand in this game, which will usually be a square that's adjacent to other safe squares, and just doing my best to keep up with the solo player's movements and fake-outs. It's definitely more engaging playing as the team than the single player, and sure, maybe it's not an amazing game, but I think it has some merits at least. Number 43, Bowser's Bad Breath.
Hey!
Oh, for the love of... It's the name of the minigame, Slim Bowser. Don't look at me like that.
I prefer to think of my breath as spicy, okay?
Whatever. It's a good idea for a Bowser game, although it can be a little hard for Bowser to secure points if you're playing against a team of players that can react well to your fire breath attacks.
Also, if your hot and spicy breath gets tired, you can use the A button to blow fire as well. So, hey, it's a win-win.
Number 42, Mega Sledge Bros Card Chaos. Remember Drybone's boss minigame from Mario Party 9? Well, this is pretty much the same thing, with some slight alterations. Mainly in this version, cards can get removed, which could throw you off if you only pay attention to specific cards. But I think that at least throws in some extra strategy into the mix. Also, this game is long. Number 41, Mega Goomba's Ladder Leap. This game is kind of like the Mechakoopa game we looked at earlier, but way more simple and way more fun. Not amazingly fun or anything, but enough to feel fair and to the point. Number 40, Balloon Blast Bash. We all knew Mario Party 7 did the whole blow this balloon up as big as possible without popping it thing, and while that game was most certainly a dud, I think something like this should have been that final product instead. Yeah, you can't really predict when the balloon is going to pop, giving this a small degree of a luck factor, but I think that actually turns this game into quite an intriguing game of chicken, as you and your opponents try to very subtly increase your size over the others, making it a very interesting mind game. Number 39, Soccer Brawl. Even though motion controls are not a major thing in Mario Party anymore, there are still some games that feature them, and by extension, games that probably don't need them. And this is perhaps one of those examples. I like the idea for this one a lot, and it's a tribute to a concept that you would likely see in a Mario Party game of old. You know, with bumper balls and everything. But the motion controls really make this one a bit difficult to control, and it can be really hard to secure a point in this one as well. It's an okay 2 versus 2 game, but I probably don't like it as much as other people probably do. Number 38, Movin' Mushrooms. I'm very conflicted about this one. I really like the idea here, but it can be a bit chaotic, especially as the single player. I definitely prefer playing as the team in this one, and even then, it's better if your paddle is on the bottom row, as that will give you more control over which container the mushrooms ultimately land in. The single player controlling 3 paddles, while nice, again, it's hard to keep track of each individual paddle to set yourself up with a good score by the end of the minigame. Number 37, Ice Slide, U Slide. The one issue I have with this minigame is that you press the B button to duck under the enemies, but swing the Wiimote to jump over the snowballs. Why couldn't both actions be designated to 2 different buttons? Why the forced motion control here? It's not too bad at least. Also, the ending features Wiimote shaking, which, although I'm not crazy about, I do think it's kind of an exciting way to end this racing game at the very least. Number 36, Spring Fling. I guess the solo player is mad that they didn't get a date to the Spring Fling, so they're taking it out on the team of rivals instead. Good idea for a minigame, although I feel like the team has an advantage, especially if it's a team of human players who can probably react better to other humans' movements.
Number 35, Bowser's Butt Bash. This game is fun because I get to smash the other players with my butt.
Slim Bowser, please. The game is called Bowser's High Dive.
But I'm not diving, I'm butt bashing.
Maybe so, but Nintendo has an E for everyone rating to fulfill here. So let's please stop talking about your ass. Anyway, a very simple minigame that kind of comes down to if either side can react fast enough to making a last-second movement before the Koopa King comes crashing down. The fact that Bowser's goal is just to do damage here and not try to eliminate every player, I can appreciate this a lot more over a minigame like Hide and Sneak and Hide and Go Boom, where full eliminations is the whole point. So, this gets some extra kudos from me. This really does work as a Bowser minigame, and I'm glad they actually tried something like this here. Number 34, Pipe Sniper. I like target shooting games, but this one doesn't really do it for me as much compared to others like Booting Gallery. Maybe I'm kind of just resigned to them at this point because there have been just so many good ones already, and this one is just kind of there. It's still fine though. Number 33, Bowser's Roulette Rage. Bowser lays claim to sections of the roulette wheel, spins it around, and tries to stop it so other players land in his sections. And despite it being a roulette wheel, this game isn't actually luck-based. Both sides have full control here, which I think it makes it more interesting.
Yeah, and you can even claim a certain space more than once and do double or triple the normal damage, at the cost of less space, of course.
It's a pretty good and balanced Bowser minigame, I must say. Number 32, Balance Ball Brawl. I love the idea of this minigame, and it can be fun to try and optimize rolling over all the spaces the fastest. The one hang-up, though, is sharing this field with multiple people can lead to scenarios where you might get stuck or blocked off by other players, which is a little annoying. Also, it has motion controls which didn't really need to be used. Otherwise, though, I do like the idea for this one. Number 31, Bouncy Bounty. Another dual job cooperative 2 vs 2 minigame, and once again, while I do feel like one side is clearly better than the other, in this case, the player jumping, I do think the partner carrying the note block is better integrated here, and makes the teamwork a little more immersive and fun for this minigame. Number 30, Dice in Dash. This game reminds me of Toad in the Box from Mario Party 2, but with a slightly different setup, and if anything, kind of a bit less exciting than its predecessor. There isn't really a luck-based element this time, but it's also just a lot shorter too. Number 29, Mega Cheap Chomp Shell Shock. Womp should really take notes here, because this has elements of the Womp boss minigame in Mario Party 9, but done in a much more interesting way. For each round, you have 3 shots, and each shot will give you a point. However, every shot will also push Cheap Chomp 90 degrees, so it's facing a different direction and a different player each time it's hit. Your goal is to try and score as many points as possible, while also making sure it doesn't end the round facing you, because then you'll lose some points as a result. It's just a much better way of handling that luck-based mind game element of the previous iteration, especially since it gives you more of an idea of what the other players are doing and working with. Number 28, Peepa Panic. It's a basic survival and get to the end type of minigame, kind of like the Spike Ball game from earlier, but it's a lot less punishing if you get hits. Not to mention, you have more hits in general, and it's not as long either. I also just like that they're trying to make some of the different enemy variants more relevant in these games, because they could have just easily used Boos here, but no, they decided to give the ghostly Peepa enemies some time in the spotlight, which is kind of neat. Not only does it make the minigame stand out more, but also highlights the more unique properties of those enemies in question.
Number 27, Bowser's Sinister Slots. I really like that word, sinister. It makes me feel very cunning and dangerous, and I like that.
You are most certainly full of yourself and enjoy that bad boy side of yours, don't you? Anyway, this game can be quite chaotic, but a kind of controlled chaos that I enjoy. The bullet bills only aim at targeted players, and while they aren't too hard to avoid, Bowser can unload new firing waves pretty quickly. And remember, since you're only trying to use these games to do damage for Bowser Party, there's no pressure to eliminate everyone, just trying to do as much damage as possible to weaken the others, so I think it works pretty well for both sides. Number 26, Foo Me Once. It's a memory game where if you can memorize button inputs, you should be in good shape to take first place. And who knows, maybe if you're lucky enough, the other players will knock themselves out before you even get that far. Short, sweet, to the point, and pretty good. Number 25, Goomba Gallop. Here's a game that I wish actually had more rounds involved with it, because only doing 2 rounds I think is a little weird. Especially since there are a number of minigames that in the past, future, and even present Mario Party games that use this correct and fastest answers get more points system for 3 rounds. So why only 2 here? It's a pretty solid minigame otherwise, forces you to pay attention and make your best guess on what the correct answer is. Number 24, Platform Push. Another survival game, but I really like this one compared to a majority of the other ones in this game, because I like the idea that the platform gets smaller the more players get eliminated. Kinda reminds me of a Bomberman game, when there's only a minute left in battle mode, and the walls start to close in order to add intensity. It's a pretty solid game. Number 23, Shape Up. Here's another game where I feel like this could have scored higher if there was a little more to it, because I love the idea otherwise. In this game, you and your partner stack shapes until your structure overtakes the grading line and remains intact without toppling over. Honestly, the only downside of this game is that I feel it's too short and kind of easy. Probably a type of exercise that would be more immersive outside of a video game than within one. Still though, I like that they finally did a game like this. Number 22, BOB-OMB Bogey. Yes, I love golfing minigames, this is true, and I think BOB-OMB Bogey is another pretty solid one. And I might actually enjoy the challenge of this one over Sunday Drivers if I'm being honest. The challenge here is being the first player to strike the ball for each round to get more points, while also trying to avoid hitting the bob-ombs, which will make you lose points. Definitely a game that tests your ability to have quick, but also controlled reactions. Number 21, Jewel Drop. Not my favorite puzzle game of the Mario Party series, but I can't really say this game does much wrong. Pretty par for the course with a relaxing high score endurance variant, and a nice 1 vs 1 multiplayer version as well. Number 20, Bullet Bill Bullies. I admit this one might come as a bit of a surprise, considering how difficult this looks for the single player, but I don't know. I feel like the aiming for the team can be just as difficult, and the solo player does have 3 hits, so I think it balances it out. I honestly just thought this was a clever inclusion of the left and right sliding platforms from the Super Mario 3D Land and World games. Number 19, Mega Monty Mole's Maze Mischief. Try saying that 3 times fast. Anyway, definitely one of the best boss minigames for this title for certain. But I gotta say, I do wish the mazes were a little bigger in order to spice things up a little. Still though, pretty balanced considering that a player could easily get screwed over and around with bad placement. Number 18, Beeline Shrine. Why am I reminded of the Hornet Maestro boss fight from Pikmin 3 with this minigame? I suppose this counts as another survival game, and one thing I do like about it is that in addition to having multiple hits, the number of times you do get hit in the game does affect your placement here, which I think is more than fair. It's pretty much all fired up for Mario Party 3, but a much easier version of it for sure. Number 17, Shy Guy Shuffle. This is very similar to the Monty Mole Shuffle game from Mario Party 9, but I think this one is a little better since it's not as punishing if you pick wrong, or if you get forced into picking another Shy Guy because another player got to yours first. Number 16, Snake Block Party. I know the snake blocks aren't exactly a fan favorite obstacle for people who play Mario games, but considering they originated in Mario World, I admittedly have the slightest bit of nostalgia for them. Anyway, this game is Mario Party 10's version of Skychinks from the last title, but without the platforming, meaning it's more of just waiting around for the blocks to form and making sure you're at least somewhat in front when the finish line approaches. It still plays really well and I do quite enjoy the game, but it doesn't quite put it in the top 10 for me this time. Also, here's a tip. Try not to jump too much at the end, because if you end up bouncing on another player before you hit the ground at the finish line, the other players may swipe first or a couple of other places away from you, and unlike Beeline Shrine, your number of hearts do not affect finish placement, only the arrival time. Number 15, Paintball Battle. Considering Mario Party 10 came out 2 months before Splatoon, I find it really hard not to see this minigame as some kind of homage to the new IP. All jokes aside, this is a really solid free-for-all knockout game. It's simple and to the point, it controls really well, and I could see this being a big contender on a number of people's best minigames list for this title. My only problem with it is the arena is a little too small, and it's kind of too easy to gang up on other players. But that's a problem that even Shellshock had to deal with as well, and that's also a really good minigame. Number 14, Bouncy Brawl. Yeah, we've had bumper balls and bounce and trounce, plus a number of other variations over the years, but I don't know, this one kind of sticks out to me for being pretty unique and also kind of clever with its control design. You mash the 2 button to spin faster while bouncing around in this arena, and the faster you spin, the more force you'll push your opponents with. However, if you spin too fast, you'll get weakened, which means you'll be completely vulnerable to other players trying to knock you out. This means you have to spin with a bit of moderation, as to not tire your character out, while still being aggressive against the other players that could be caught off guard with a nice bump. Pretty cool idea and a pretty fun minigame. Number 13, Found It, Pound It. Mario Party 7's cardinal rule comes to mind when looking at this minigame, although on a much smaller scale and also as a free-for-all minigame instead of a team endeavor. Although, I kind of prefer this version if I'm being honest. You only have 3 rounds to work with here, and you need to pay attention to not only the panels you need to ground pound, but also your opponents as well, as they can very easily mess with you as you're trying to score your points for each round. It can be a bit irritating trying to keep the others at bay, but there's more than one picture for each round, so you have at least a couple of options to work with. Also, when all else fails, try to ground pound them before the round begins to try and get a head start. They're programmed that in for a reason, after all. Number 12, Bump, Set, Spike. Probably the best use of motion controls in Mario Party 10, at least as far as I can tell. You and your partner swing your Wiimote to spike volleyballs across a net. One player sets it up while the other player spikes it down. It's all about getting that right timing, which isn't too hard to do, and makes for a pretty fun exercise. Number 11, Cheep, Cheep, Leap. I want to say this one was one of my top contenders the first time I ranked Mario Party 10, and although it's out of the top 10 this time, I still think it's a really good minigame, and I really love and respect the idea and the reference to classic Mario gameplay with jumping Cheep Cheeps and use of the Starman to knock them out. I suppose the thing that brought this game down a little was that it can get a little too crowded at times, especially if multiple players try to go for the same Cheep Cheeps. A little bit of the same problem Note to Self had in Mario Party 6, for example. But still, I think it's a really fun minigame to play, and I still give it some pretty high regards. Number 10. Okay, Slim Bowser, we just have 10 more minigames to rank, and I think there's no one better to name this next one, because we have the final Bowser Party minigame of this list.
Indeed we do. And although I would personally have all 10 Bowser games in my top 10, I suppose this one will do for the top spot because we have Bowser's Firebar Fury. It's a game where I get to burn the butts of every player in Team Mario, and all I have to do is tilt the gamepad to make it happen. Now, I'm not really a huge fan of gyro controls,
And I'm definitely not either.
but I do think the gamepad motion is pretty responsive, and you can get some really nice control over your fire bars, especially when you only focus on Mario and try to burn him the Kingdom Come.
And to add on to that, I think playing as Team Mario doesn't really feel that bad either. You may get hit a couple of times, especially if the Bowser player fakes you out at all, but that's just the way it is, and depending on the game in progress, you probably won't be eliminated either unless the Bowser is that ruthless.
Oh, make no mistake, I am and will be.
Number 9. Mario Party 9 had a very strong debut with the boss minigames, or at least this style of boss minigame, and Mario Party 10 had some good standouts as well. One of the best ones, in my opinion, is actually KAMEK'S Rocket Rampage. It's a side-scrolling shooter of sorts, and surprisingly enough, we haven't had an idea like this before, at least for boss minigames anyway, so this was a pretty unique idea, all things considered. In addition to avoiding Kamek's onslaught of enemies and obstacles, the players must grab missiles and aim them at Kamek to deal damage, and obtain points. In a way, it's kind of similar to the Cheep Cheep minigame from Mario Party 9, but it's not behind the camera this time, and with no motion controls either, which makes it about 200% better in my book. It's also just a pretty epic minigame for a character that could honestly be considered the second in command for the Koopa Kingdom. Number 8. If you've played Mario Party Superstars, you might be surprised to find this game here, but for 8th place, I've decided to go with Rapid River Race. Now, here's the thing with the Superstars version. Controller drift and sensitive movement makes the game feel very awkward to play. But here, it actually feels pretty damn perfect. The game tests you on your ability to switch lanes as you and your opponents race in a dead heat to the finish line. You can also increase your speed by pressing the accelerator button, but be warned, as the faster you go, the harder it is and quicker you need to be to switch lanes, and every time you get hit, your speed drops back to 0. So there's kind of a risk-reward scenario in play. Do you go max speed immediately and risk crashing, or do you play in moderation? It can definitely be fun trying to set new records in this game, and it does offer an additional layer of skill if you want to try and practice your own personal acceleration strats. I really wish they didn't mess up the Switch controls so much when making Superstars, because I think this easily could have been a dark horse in that game if it didn't have that quirk, but more on that later, obviously. Number 7. Memory is a thing I generally like being tested on in Mario Party, and I think this next game is a pretty great example of it. Fruits of Doom and Mario Party 4 could have been a pretty excellent examination of that if it wasn't for the fact that the text scrolled too fast, but Mario Party 10's mini match is a much more reasonable variation of it. In this game, you are given a picture and location of 12 Mario enemies, and your goal is to try and remember the location of all the enemies in a turn-by-turn fashion. When the game starts, one player chooses an enemy to place, and if they're correct, someone else will pick the next one, and so on until the game completes, or 3 people get eliminated by picking a wrong location. What's great about this game is that you aren't forced or locked into a location. As long as you remember something on the board, you can feel free to answer with that, or hold that info to yourself for later. This will really test your mental capacity for memorization, and I think it's a pretty fun exercise because of that. I will say though, not knowing the enemy names could be a bit of an extra challenge for those who aren't as well versed in Mario, but I wouldn't say it's a major one. It's just easier and faster referring to a Waddle Wing by name, as opposed to a flying squirrel thing, for example. Number 6. I know my Koopa friend over here was probably a bit disappointed that the Bowser minigames ended already at number 10.
Tell me about it.
But do not fret, my rambunctious reptile friend, because Bowser does have one last game up his shell in the form of the final boss minigame, Bowser's Tank Terror. Now, as I've said before, Mario Party 4's The Final Battle will always be my favorite versus Bowser minigame. However, I have to give some major kudos to this one as well, because it can definitely be quite fun and exciting. Plus, it also has a nice build-up and 2 unique phases of the fight, where after half of Bowser's health is gone, and his vehicle gets destroyed, he turns into Dry Bowser, and kind of forces the players to alter their strategy a bit from after the first half, which I think is kind of a cool twist. With lots of different attacks and obstacles to dodge, and even mushrooms to power up the other players and increase their damage output, there's a lot of substance here for a game that's practically just spamming hits on a big target. Slim Bowser, you got anything to add?
Yeah, this game should have been in the top 5.
Of course you'd say that. And yeah, don't get me wrong, this game is really good, and would be worthy of such a placement, but for me, there were 5 other games that just barely beat it out. Maybe if you weren't locked to just D-pad movement, and maybe if it wasn't as long, it could have made the difference, but those are nitpicky things at best, and I can't really say it does anything wrong otherwise. Number 5. On to the top 5, we start with a game that's as sweet as the objects you'll be collecting, as we have Fruit Scoot Scurry. In this game, you and your opponents will be jumping from platform to platform to collect as much fruit as possible. Jumping itself is essentially automatic here, so all you have to worry about is just pressing the D-pad in the right direction and moving as fast as you can. The only thing holding you back is if another player inhabits the platform you're jumping to. It's a very simple concept and checks all the boxes for what is considered a fine and fun Mario Party minigame. Number 4. I'm surprised it took this long for the developers to revisit this particular concept. They kind of did it for one of the Bowser Jr. minigames in Mario Party 9, but that wasn't a 2 vs 2 minigame unlike this. Murky Maze is essentially a variation of Mario Party 4's Team Treasure Trek, but the maze itself is a lot smaller, and you're in near absolute darkness as you feel around the area in question with nothing but a glowing lantern block. In a way, it's probably better that the maze is smaller, just because it will allow the teammates to cooperatively find each other better, but a part of me does really miss the size and scale of what Team Treasure Trek offered. Still though, it was a great seeing a game like this again, and it's easily one of my top favorites. Number 3. The 2 vs 2 category had kind of a rough start in this game, but I do think it really brought things together for the later parts of this list, with the volleyball game, the maze game we just talked about, and the final 2 vs 2 game of Mario Party 10, Ground Pound Pals. In addition to just being a cute minigame title, I really like the idea of this one. Borrowing another idea from Mario Party 9's Bowser Jr. minigames, this time Sand Trap, Both team members must line up and ground pound together to claim spaces in between them, some of which have different coin amounts listed on them. If they claim a space with a coin amount, they get that number of coins, and periodically through the minigame, the spaces will change and differing coin amounts will be offered in different places. And whatever team manages to get the most coins with a time limit will win the game. Working together and working fast will make this a very expeditious exercise, and sometimes will create some interesting scenarios as you and your partner try to figure out the best way to capitalize on your coin gains. So, you better have a solid ground pound pal on your side if you want to achieve victory in this minigame. Number 2. Mario Party had an obsession with cleaning minigames for a while, but Mario Party 9 and 10 has most certainly introduced some new obsessions to the mix, in the form of a number of games with GOOMBA'S, a number of counting minigames, and with Mario Party 10 specifically, a very strange obsession with games focusing on fruit. Our silver medal recipient for Mario Party 10 is none other than Fruit of the Doom. Aside from being a pun on an underwear brand, this game is actually a pretty fun and balanced test to see how much fruit you can collect. Fruit will flow from the waterfall in the back, and your job is to try and get as much as you can in the time limit. Not just competing with other players, but also trying to avoid the urchins that will also fall from the waterfall, and cause you to drop your fruit if you get hit by them. This should prevent players from hogging the back of the screen to farm points, as they might get spiked by an urchin before it's too late to avoid them. So once again, playing this game with a bit of moderation is key, trying to be aggressive with collecting as much as you can, but not being too aggressive that you end up losing more than you obtain. It's a very simple idea, and I'm honestly kind of surprised to see this as my number 2 personally, but I do think it holds its own for being a really good quality minigame. Number 1. There's definitely been a lot of Goomba loving in Mario Party as of late, but for our top minigame in Mario Party 10, we're actually going to be sharing some love with a different enemy. An enemy that's most certainly made a name for itself in a number of Mario games, but maybe not to the full extent that it deserves. An enemy that knows how to ride the course of life while always consistently staying on track, and for being the most adorable little me-orking pest the series has ever known. Fuzzy Flyers is the name of the game, and the goal here is to try and ride your Lakitu Cloud to the top of a giant tower. Along the way, you must dodge the bumping of other players and the fuzzies themselves, which will damage your cloud and reduce the counter of how long it takes for your cloud to dissipate. You can restore your cloud's timer a bit by collecting other clouds along the way, and grabbing these will be vital as the time it takes to ascend the tower is more than what the initial timer is. So not only is it a test to survive the ascent, but bumping around your opponents can also be vital in trying to force eliminate them before they can even get a chance to prolong their own transportation. This game is just a very unique idea, and I've always been charmed by not just the task in question, but also how well it controls and is executed here. Take a game like Bumper Bubbles in Mario Party 9 for example, a game that I really liked in theory, but is way too punishing every time you get hit and lose progress. Here, although getting knocked around by others isn't necessarily a good thing, as you can miss out on cloud extensions or lose time to fuzzies, it doesn't feel as much of a deal breaker either, as you'll likely still have other chances to save yourself and ultimately end up looking in better shape than your opponents even after just one pickup. A game that works on all of these levels is quite charming as a concept, and is just the fun type of chaos you'd expect in a game like Mario Party. It's a game that's worth praising, and for that, I think it's no surprise that Fuzzy Flyers is my favorite minigame in Mario Party 10. Well, Slim Bowser, that's going to do it for us this time. Thank you so much for joining me on this list. It wouldn't have been as awesome, enjoyable, and as silly as it ended up being.
Hey now, don't you think I'm going anywhere? Next up is Super Mario Party, and I'm playable in that game too. So, I'm thinking I'll be staying right here.
Actually, Slim Bowser, I was thinking about doing the handheld titles next. Since we're done with the console games, and there's a couple of handheld games to do, I figured it might make more sense to do those first before we move on to the console handheld hybrid system. But you can definitely come back for Super. I don't see an issue with that. After all, it is the only other Mario Party game that Bowser's playable in.
Ugh, don't remind me. Well, I'm gonna go play more of Bowser's Butt Bash, squashing my enemies with my giant powerful rear, will make me feel better and should make the wait less agonizing.
For the last time, it's called Bowser's High Dive. And stop talking about your ass! Anyway, that'll do it for Mario Party 10 and the numbered Mario Party titles. Next time, we'll be breaking some new ground as we get to a game I haven't done rankings for before, Mario Party Advance. Now, I'm not sure if it'll be next month or not, with my anniversary coming soon, and me needing to devote more time for those plans. I may need to take a break and do something smaller if I do a list for June, if any list at all. Just stay with me and be patient, as I do intend to cover the whole series this time, particularly with all the prep work I've done. Speaking of the whole series, just a quick reminder that every Friday I play Mario Party on my Twitch channel for a series I like to call Thank God It's Mario Party Friday. I've been working through the entire series again, and I've actually just recently started Super Mario Party, so if you want to check that out, I stream every Friday at around 2 PM Eastern. I also record minigames during these streams for footage that will be used in these videos, and that helps me get a preliminary idea of where some of these games will be in the rankings. So stay tuned if you ever want a sneak peek at what I'm thinking, or if you want to give me some additional things to think about for these lists. Ultimately though, it will be my opinion, but still, I like hearing what others have to say. And to that credit, if you want to share any opinions of yours in regards to my list, or your own personal list, feel free to talk about that stuff in the comments section below. Just remember to be polite and courteous, and don't insult mine or anyone else's thoughts. Let's keep it civil here, folks. Thank you guys for joining me once again. I'll see you fine folk next time, and remember to keep partying on. Later, everyone.